The question of how to sharpen a hoof knife comes up all the time. It's an important tool. It's probably the most important tool when it comes to the longevity of your horseshoeing career. Having a sharp, workable tool will help you shoe horses, will help you do it easier, and thus keep your body healthier, and you can do it for a lot longer. The problem is, not everybody knows how to sharpen a hoof knife, and the question always comes up, how do I get this thing sharp? And how do I keep it sharp? The point of this video is to show you guys all the principles around keeping a hoof knife sharp, what type of materials to use, what type of hoof knife to look for, and how to do it yourself. And I hope this works out for you guys really well. So here's our typical horseshoe and hoof knife. This one here is just a Yukon Forage right-handed knife. Most manufacturers today, you get a knife and you should be able to cut the hoof with it right out of the box. But then when you start working on the horn, you start knocking off the edge and it becomes dull. And as soon as you do that, the typical thing was to do is to get a round, like a file, the chainsaw file or a diamond file or something like that. And then you come in here and you try to put that edge back onto it. The problem is by doing that, you back up the edge and you make the blade itself fat, and then you lose your sharpness. Now, we're gonna show you a different way to do it. We're gonna use buffing wheels, we're gonna use rouge, and we're gonna show you how to keep a razor edge by also keeping the belly out of the hoof knife. So we're gonna go through a two-stage process on a sharpening knife. We're gonna have a rough and we're gonna have a polish. So the rough is gonna take out material and the polish is gonna get that final edge sharpness. But we're gonna need some items for that. What you're gonna need first off is you're gonna need some buffing wheels. These are cotton wheels that you can get at most ferrous supply stores or knife making supply stores, online or at your local ferrous supply store. You need two of them. You're gonna need one that's rough that we're gonna put the rough rouge on, and then we're gonna need another one that we're gonna put the white rouge on to it. Now, I normally like these ones. These are like 3/4 inch, but you can use the 1/2 inch. It doesn't really matter. It's just kind of what you prefer. Now, next we're gonna need is the rouge. Now, the rouge is the critical part, especially the rough rouge. This is Grit Greaseless rouge. You can get this on Amazon. We'll put a link in the bio down below. Check that out. Not sponsored. You just need to get greaseless rouge, and this is 80 grit. It's not expensive, it's easy to get, and it's easy to use, but this is critical for really taking the belly out of a hoof knife. So this is our secret ingredient. Now, once we get the majority of the material out of the way, then we also need to polish the blade so it has that razor edge sharpness. And we just use white rouge. You can get this at most knife making supply places and ferrous supply places. It's very common, easy to get, it's not expensive. A block like this will last you years. So between these two things, we gotta apply it. So you're gonna need your nasty cup, tongue depressor, some water, a way to heat up the rouge, and then your grinder. Now, we're gonna show you our grinder, which is the shop grinder. It's a big grinder. You don't have to have a big grinder. You can have a little 6-inch grinder. You can put that in your truck. You can use that for maintenance, or you can put it in your shop, but it's not very expensive and it's really easy to use, and all these wheels can go onto the arbor and you'll be set. Okay, let's set up this cotton wheel with our 80 grit rouge. We're gonna start by just opening it up, and you just take some of the stuff, and it's just kind of crumbly. It will dry out, so it's easier to work with when it's wet and kind of moist. So we'll just put it in our nasty cup. You don't need a ton, just need about that much. And then we're gonna add a little bit of water to it. Now you can put this in the microwave, but I think there's some kind of metal into it or something, and it'll spark. So, but you only want like 10 seconds or so in the microwave. But for here, we're gonna just use a toaster oven. So we got our stuff, got a little bit of water in there, and we're just gonna set it up in the toaster oven. And I just set it on high, 400 degrees. I just want to get it hot. And what happens is the rouge just kind of melts into the cup. And then we're going to use our thumb depressor to smear it onto here and get it all into the edges. And then that's how we'll embed the wheel with the rouge. This only takes a couple of minutes in toaster oven. In a microwave, you're talking about like 10 seconds or so. It goes really quick. So we're gonna end this guy. You just do that, there we go, all right. And then it's hot, so you gotta be a little careful. Whoop. Ooh, hot. All right, so just make sure it's all mixed in. And then we're just gonna stir it with our thumb depressor, make sure it's nice and melted. And then we're gonna start applying it to the wheel. Now you wanna use something that, that you can apply onto the wheel, like a thumb depressor or spoon or something like that, because you don't really wanna get your hands in this because it gets a little hot. And then all we're gonna do is start applying it onto the wheel. It's kind of neat because as it's wet and moldable like this, it just starts soaking right into the cotton wheels. And that's why we use the cotton wheels, is so that this stuff can just really soak into it. And there's like sand. See, there's parts of it's not completely melted, and it's kind of like a gooey sand. And it's got glue into it, so it'll start sticking here and just getting down into it. And that's kind of what you want. You want it all over, all throughout this guy, and just right down into all the edges. Because that sand is what we're going to use as an abrasive to kill the belly. And the belly is the enemy. It will make your knife dull, and you can't really get it sharp if it's got a big fat belly onto it, like we discussed. So this is our secret to keeping that belly out. And we'll just keep putting this on there. And it's gooey, it's messy, but it does last quite a while. Once you set up a wheel, it will go through a bunch of knives before you have to add more. And normally what I like to do is set up a couple different wheels, and then spend a day on when I'm just doing maintenance or paperwork on a day of business or whatever. Then I set up a wheel, and then usually I'm good for several months. But you see, we're getting it into all the cracks, all the crevices, really trying to goop that stuff down into it. And we'll see, obviously it's turning very red here, which is nice. You kind of want the edges too, because that helps you with the hook. Because we like to have the hook sharp also. That way we can make the frog look and the conversers look really nice. We can get debris out of the way, and it just overall helps with trimming. All right, so once we've got this stuff applied quite liberally all over this thing, we got to smooth it all out, because you can't have all these bumps and lumps throughout your wheel. They'll just fly every which way, and it's kind of dangerous. So, all right. Then, once we've got that out of the way, all you just need now is just a little bit of water. And what I normally do is just put some water in my hand like this, and then we're just going to apply it on here and smooth up the wheel. You can see all that rouge just kind of gets down into it, makes a nice film over everything, and makes it almost like one solid thing. And yep, it is dirty, it is messy, but like again, you can it lasts for quite a while. If you want to wear gloves, you can do that too. But it's like playing in sand. There you go. So at this point, you need to let this sit for about 24 hours or out in the sun for 12 hours or something like that. I usually wait a good 24 hours before I start using it, so that I know it's embedded down into the wheel and it's dry. Really, the main point is you want this stuff to dry down into the wheel, and it'll stick onto the cotton. So, and we'll put that outside and let it dry, and in in a day or so, we've got this, which is the finished product. So this was all set up, and it will set into just to dry for 24 hours, and then we're all set. So again, this is a 3/4 inch wheel with the rouge all ready to go. So let's talk about the principles of the hoof knife. So this is our shop knife. It is not sharp. You can run your finger on it, it's not gonna cut you. So we're gonna sharpen this guy up. So let's talk about the belly. What is the belly? And let's look at a cross section of this. So I'm going to draw this thing as if we cut it right here and we're looking straight down at it. So what we're going to look at is the grind, right? So here is our hollow grind up to our spine, and then the backside of the hoof knife. Okay, so we got one grind that's a hollow grind, and then the other side that's a flat grind, okay? And this is our cutting edge. When we use our hoof knife, what happens is that this point ends up getting knocked off, right? So your point either goes that way or it goes that way, and it no longer becomes sharp. So we take our file and we go and we knock that and we knock that to make it sharp again, right? And then it gets dull again, and we use our file and we make it sharp again, and it gets dull again, and we keep coming back and coming back until we have our belly, right? So this is the fat belly of the hoof knife. You can't get this sharp anymore because the belly is in the way, all right? So that's what happens normally if you just take a file to it. But then we go back to our hoof knife here, and when it gets dull, when this gets folded over, we bring in our big wheel, and our wheel comes in with the hollow grind and knocks that off. It's not only making that sharp again, but it's taking out the belly. And then it takes out the belly. Now, and you keep going as you keep going with the knife, and you're using the buffing wheels, you keep that belly out of it, and you keep it has a nice sharp point to it, right? So being thin is sharp, being fat is dull. And the reason we use these is to keep the fatness out, and we're able to keep this nice and thin and keep it sharp throughout the life of the hoof knife, which makes life so much easier. For our purposes here, we're going to be using our grinder, our sharp grinder. This is what I use every day for sharpening our hoof knives, for sale, getting them out the door. It is way overkill for everybody's shop. You don't have to have this big of a grinder. It works great because I got plenty of room so I can explain to you what I'm doing. But at home, in your truck, you can just use one of those 6-inch grinders, and they work perfect. This has a 5/8 arbor, and so those cotton wheels, you just drill the hole into it for what you need, and then you put it onto the grinder and you set it up. You just want to make it firm. Let's talk about kind of safety of what we're doing here. So we're using cotton wheels, right? So these things are cotton. So this stuff loves to grab stuff and throw it. This is spinning at a high rate of speed. There's a danger factor here. So I don't recommend you doing this unless you know what you're doing. And then 2, we've got some stuff set up to keep us safe here at the shop. So one of the things that we do, one of the biggest, most important things that we do is we turn the grinder around. So these wheels are going to spin this way, okay? Which is important because if I hit the back edge of this knife and it grabs it, it will throw it into the wall. If it's going this way, and I'm grinding this way and it grabs the back edge of it, it can come down and get into your leg. Or worse, right? So you don't want this coming at you. You want it going away from you. Even the 6-inch grinders, we flip around, so you got everything's backwards, so it's going this way. So you want everything to go away from you. Second thing is you need safety glasses. It is the utmost important that you wear safety glasses when doing this stuff because it's spinning at a high rate of speed. There's little particles in here and it'll jab you in the eye, and it's not cool. Right, we only have 2 eyes. We need to protect them. So safety glasses are great for that. It's 100%. You got to wear safety glasses all the time that you do this. So before we get this thing going, let's talk about how we hold the hoof knife to the wheel. So we always start with the rough, and we go to the white polishing rouge. So this part of the wheel, all this is about is getting rid of material. So we're going to get rid of our belly, put in our hollow grind, and get that feathered edge, right? So we're going to grind this thing down to a feathered edge so that we can polish that off, and then that is how we're gonna make it like super sharp for us, right? So when we hold this onto here, we're going to hold it so the hollow grind can really get into the knife, but I don't wanna get to the point where I'm catching the back of the edge of this. I wanna just barely be off of that. And I'm gonna work this all the way up to the hook, and I can work the hook and the whole blade until I get you know, the thickness out of the blade and we start making it sharp. But then we're gonna flip it around on this side, and we're gonna work this side of the knife, and we'll get both sides. And this we're gonna try to lay as flat as we can and not try to worry about the hollow grind, but we wanna keep this flat. But we're gonna do most of the work, like probably 90% of our work is just gonna be into here, and 10% will be right up here. We're gonna get it where it's a little bit of a feather edge on here, and then we're gonna go over to here, and this is the polishing wheel. We'll apply the rouge while it's running, and then we will, again, we'll work this edge back and forth, and then we'll work this edge back and forth all the way around the hook. And what we're gonna try to do is take that feathered edge off of here, and then underneath it will be a polished, sharp razor edge of a hoof knife. All right, here we go. We'll work the hollow grind onto the wheel, and you can see how that rouge is really abrasive, and you got the sparks coming off of it. We're really actually moving material off this blade. Now, the concern is getting it too hot, right? So we don't want to get it too hot, but we got to get that work. And you can see here, we're really starting to get that belly out of the hoof knife. So we're starting to get that belly right out of there. I can quench it, does not get it too hot, but we're using an air hardened steel, so it's not that big a deal. Now we're gonna work this belly some more. And you can see the flange, I can get that, the hook, I can work the hook right in there. And I can get the sharpness right up all the way through the hook, which is ideal. This knife is pretty dull, so we're gonna get to doing some work here on this guy today. And we're just gonna work back and forth, and what we're looking for is this thing to start feathering on the edge. See, it's just starting to do it now. Got most of the work done on this thing. I'm gonna lighten up a little bit on my pressure. I'm just kind of working that edge again, trying to get that feather to pop out. That's a little bit deeper. There we go. Now we're starting to see the feather. You can just see it on the very edge is starting to pop out here. Now that I've got that, I'm going to flip it around and I'm going to work this side of it. And I'm going to make sure I got that feather folded back over the other way. Yep, I can see it moving now. I'm good there. I'm going to work the hook. So I want that to be sharp too. There we go. All right. So now you can see the little bitty feather that's you can almost fold it back and forth with your finger. That's super thin. You're never going to get that to completely come off with the rough rouge. So that's why we need to go over to the polishing wheel now to take off that feather that's folding back and forth and really get the final edge to this thing. All right, once we're going here, we'll just put a little extra rouge on here. And then we'll start buffing out the edge with the white rouge. Same thing, we're going to work on the belly. And we're going to work that feather. I'm can be a little bit more aggressive on the edge on the backside because you're not really taking out a lot of material. You're just getting rid of the feather and polishing up underneath. And if you look closely, you can see that feather just getting ripped off of there, and it's just really getting a nice razor edge underneath that. And there we go, I got it sharp. And got a razor edge, we got it polished, and we're ready to go to work. So there's a lot of hoof knives on the market. What I like to talk about is what type of steel, what type of knife that you should look for. Our hoof knives, Yukon Forage hoof knives, are made of 440C stainless. So it's an air-hardened steel, which works really good with the buffing compounds because it's going to get hot, right? So you're going to get it hot in the air. You can work with that with water so you don't get it too hot, but you're going to get it hot. It doesn't seem to really hurt our blades and actually works really well. So whatever hoof knife that you buy, you want an air-hardened type steel, which is what we use. This is the 440C stainless. It's great, it's tough, it's flexible, works really good. These hoof knives are going to go through a lot of work. It is a working knife. You're going to go through them, you're going to destroy them. I get a lot of questions about the buffing wheels. Isn't that pretty aggressive? Aren't you wearing down the knife? And my answer to that is yes, it's aggressive. Yes, you're going to wear down the knife. Yes, it takes steel off of the knife. This is a tool, right? We can replace this. We can buy a new one. We want to keep it sharp because the wrist, we don't want to have to buy a new wrist. You don't want to have issues with your elbow and your wrist that comes from having a dull knife, right? Take the time to sharpen it correctly. Take the time to really have a nice tool so that it helps out your body and keeps you shoeing horses a lot longer. That's my philosophy with hoof knife sharpening, and I think it should be yours too.